about. So welcome so much to this program this evening, Rainscaping Solutions, presented as part of the Partners for Native Landscaping webinar series. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that you don't have to have a library card or be a resident of St. Louis County to attend our virtual programs. We hope you enjoy yourself or learn something new and share that with family and friends. This program, as I mentioned, is a part of the Partners for Native Landscaping webinar series, and the partners are also hosting an in-person workshop and plant sale on April 15th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And that will be at the Powder Valley Conservation Nature Center. They'll also have the Native Plant Fair with Beyond Housing on April 30th. And you can find out about those events in addition to the rest of the webinar series through the Partners for Native Landscaping website. And I'll share that link in a moment along with the other things I'm about to mention. But the next thing I want to bring up is that we have several sessions in the series remaining, including tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. So Wednesday, March 22nd at 2 p.m. We'll have How Native Landscaping Makes a Difference with Dr. Gerardo Camilo of the Billiken Bee Lab. And then next Tuesday evening, we'll have Our Garden is for the Birds with Margie Terpstra. And that's again, Tuesday, March 28th at 7 p.m. You can register for these programs or any SLCL program by going to slcl.org/events. And you can also catch up on most any program you miss of the library's programming schedule, but also importantly, the previous 4 sessions we've had in this year's Native Landscaping series. Those are posted on the What Library's YouTube channel, and you can check those out as well. The links to all those things, including a Partners for Native Landscaping survey about tonight's webinar, will be posted in the chat here in a moment. But first, before I get down to that business, I would like to introduce you to this evening's presenters, Allison Joyce and Roland Beal. Allison Joyce is the Sustainability Coordinator for the Rainscaping team of Missouri Botanical Gardens Earthways Center. She administers both the MSD Rainscaping Small Grants Program and the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Rainscaping Cost Share Program. Before moving to St. Louis for this job, Allison worked as the manager of a plant nursery in California. And Allison received her master's in ethnobotany from the University of Kent in England and is passionate about finding solutions to environmental crises that benefit people as well as nature. Roland Beal is an environmental specialist at the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District Project Clear Division of Environmental Compliance and coordinates the St. Louis County Stormwater Phase 2 permit activities. Roland works closely with the St. Louis County municipalities on water quality education and regulatory requirements assistance. Roland is a dedicated public servant, good partner with many communities and organizations, and is a major player in our regional river cleanups and a strong advocate of green infrastructure. Roland received his BS in civil engineering from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, and he has 28 years of regulatory affairs and permit writing experience while at MSD. Thank you both for being with us and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We really appreciate you being a part of the Partners for Native Landscaping. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen. And go ahead and get started. All right, I'm Allison Joyce and presenting with Roland Beal. We're going to talk about Rainscaping Solutions. And before I get started, I have to shout out our sponsors because we're so grateful to them. Of course, we're sponsored by MSD and the US EPA through MoDNR Section 319 grant. And then we have a couple of private funders as well.
Great. Thanks, Allison. So I'm going to go ahead and step in here. So she and I are going to be going back and forth, tag teaming the information we're going to cover tonight. And again, I just want to thank Allison for joining me tonight and the St. Louis County Library System for hosting the events. And they've been wonderful. And I've been a part of the Partners program now for about almost a dozen years now, and really enjoy it. And this program is really great, educational. I'm glad we get so many people to join on. So tonight we're going to cover several things regarding rainscaping and the benefits of native plants and stormwater solutions. So I'm going to cover background of rainscaping in St. Louis, kind of give just a general stormwater 101 class, you know, how the native plants and rainscaping can address stormwater issues in St. Louis city and county, and talk a little bit why that's so important to MSD, because we're the utility. We cover wastewater and stormwater issues. We're two utilities in one. It's very important to us. So what we're all doing and what we're all teaching you tonight can really help MSD out a lot in our stormwater, environmental issues, water, related to water quality issues in our area. And then I'm going to kind of show you some examples of what the community is doing to address some of the stormwater issues. And then we're going to jump into a little more of that detail, more information on rainscaping, what you can do at home. Allison's going to cover some rainscaping features, benefits of native plants. Then I'm going to go into actually a planning and designing of going through a simple rain garden design and calculation, then some basic maintenance requirements. And then Allison's going to jump back in, cover funding opportunities available to the St. Louis area landowners. And then we'll cover a few basic resources, websites and tools, and then end with questions and answers. Next slide. Great. So stormwater pollutants impact on water quality. Bacteria is one of the big issues we address in the area. Our sediment was one of the issues. Sediments are related to a lot of land disturbance, construction activities in the area. It can cause turbidity in our waters. You know, it can impact aquatic life. Fish can't find their food. Fish eggs is a big problem, and it just doesn't look very nice either. The next bacteria we have a problem with is bacteria, and so that's okay. It's kind of weird how you got these slides set up, so they kind of go through everything. If you can back up the bacteria, that'd be great. The bacteria primarily, we got leaking septic tank issues, and you know, and one picture there is actually it should be in one of those images there, but pet waste is a big deal. So one of the things we want everyone to do is pick up their pet waste, because obviously if pet waste is left on the ground from walking your dogs around the neighborhood or in your backyard, when it rains or snow melts, it's going to convey that bacteria from the pet waste into our local creeks and streams untreated. And we have several creeks and streams in our area that are impacted from bacteria. Chloride, obviously that's from salt from winter de-icing activities. That's a big problem we have in the area, but we are seeing some benefits from a lot of the education we're doing in the area. We're working with municipalities and even homeowners and trying to put less salt down the roads. Hold the salt is one of our slogans. You know, we try to explain, you know, shovel first before salting. Municipalities, we're actively engaging them through education, implementing best management practices. A lot of cities are implementing brine systems, using saltwater solutions, using less chloride in our creeks and streams. And we are proud to say that we are seeing some watersheds that are seeing improved health, lower chloride issues, salt concentrations in our creeks and streams in the wintertime. The next pollutant is nutrients. So that's a lot of that's related to putting on fertilizers. So parks, green spaces, you know, home, we want our lawns to look nice and green, right? But putting down too much can be a problem. So what we're doing is a lot of education on just putting down the right amounts. We're telling one to follow the instructions, follow good practices when putting down fertilizers. You know, watch the weather. Is a big thing. Make sure you don't overspread. The fertilizer doesn't go on to the impervious surfaces and run off. Because what can happen with nutrients from fertilizers, it can lower the oxygen demand in our waterways and cause algae blooms. And that's a problem, because if there's too much oxygen consumed in our creeks and streams, that's not enough oxygen for our fish to survive in aquatic life. So that can be a big problem. So the next pollutant we try to address is trash. So, you know, a lot of trash from illegal dumping and littering is a big problem. Open dumpster lids can be a problem. When it rains, the water will just leak through the dumpsters and leach out the bottom to the drain ports, and all that water that will run off will go right to our creeks and streams untreated. Large items from illegal dumping, such as tires, appliances, can impede critical stream flow in our creeks and streams. A good example is, you're going to hit a couple slides there down, is Peanut the turtle. You'll see an image of him pop up here. Peanut turtle is he was when he was little, he had a piece of plastic wrapped around him. I think one more, Allison, you'll see him come up there. Next one. There he is. So he's out actually Powder Valley Nature Center. And so when he was little, he got some plastic wrapped around him. And obviously when he grew up, his shell formed in the shape of a peanut. So this is a big problem with a lot of wide trash and litter as a problem in creeks and streams. Just again, too, it just doesn't look nice too, right, for aesthetic issues. The next pollutant, which you'll see there is fats, oil, and greases, or fog. We're telling everyone not to dump their fog kitchen grease down their sinks because it can cause blockages in the creeks and streams, and also expensive because it can be expensive to the homeowner to clean out the blockages, and also MSD if we have to go out to our main lines and clean grease out of our pipes. So the problem is that there is a blockage. That when it does rain, it'll fill up the storm sewer and there'll be overflow in that fats, oil, and greases will go right to a creek or stream and cause problems. So the next pollutant, the last one I'll cover here briefly, we're trying to address the stormwater issues, is metal organics, particularly household hazardous waste, chemicals, antifreezes, used oils, paints, oils, things like that. We don't want those people dumping them outside. So we're doing things such as we have drop-off locations where we're seeing Lewis County on, and other means we're getting people to recycle those materials and dispose of them properly. Next slide. So another issue we have is too much runoff, right? In addition to the pollutants, we've gone to the image there on the left there, you see green space where we had trees, natural runoff. But from years and decades of development in the area of buildings, parking lots, roofs, driveways, streets, where's all that runoff going to go? It's going to go to our creeks and streams and cause a lot of problems in addition to carrying all those pollutants, but also it will cause erosion problems too. A good idea of seeing the pollutants is the image on the left there from snow piles left on the roadways. You see the dirty snow along the roadways. What is all that? That's grease, metals, organics, all from roadway runoffs. So these are a lot of problems that are impacting our water quality. Next slide. Another problem we have are combined sewer overflows. You might have heard about this. And so when normally a system is separated nowadays by a separate and combined by a separate storm sewer system and a sanitary system. So everything from your house goes to one pipe and then goes to the treatment plant and is treated and returned to the river. Combined sewer system is when the inside drains and the outside drains and parking lots and rooftops are connected together and go to the treatment plant. On the left here, you're going to see dry weather. It's fine. There's no problem, right? Everything from inside the building goes on the pipe, goes to the POTW, which is the publicly owned treatment works, and gets treated. But when wet weather occurs, what happens? That outside runoff is combined with the inside runoff, drains, and they're going to have overflows. So one of the things we're addressing in Project Clear program is we're spending several $1 billion, billion with a B, to address these issues, to eliminate the outfalls, but also using green infrastructure and rainscaping to address a lot of these issues. Next slide, Allison. So one way you look at the impact of all these stormwater issues is fish diversity. Here's just a good example. It's a bar graph showing the Merrimack, a part of the Merrimack tributary system down south. The left, the y-axis there is the number of fish species in that area. And then on the bottom, you're going to see all the low bar areas are the low number of fish diversity, low number of fish species found, or an urban area, creeks and streams in the watershed. If you go out all the way to the right there, LaBarque and Fox Creek, those are out in the rural areas, look at the number of fish species. They're thriving a lot more. So this is another impact of stormwater problems in our area, how we look at them. Next slide. So stormwater issues, the regulations background, just a little bit of history of the regulations. The Clean Water Act is what primarily drives MSD, how we operate, was developed several years ago. The Clean Water Act under EPA was amended in 1987 to address stormwater issues. And they were going to roll this out in 2 phases, large cities and small cities. So the small cities were impacted with St. Louis County in 1999. Next slide. So we have a stormwater permit that we work with St. Louis County on, and 59 St. Louis County municipalities to address the stormwater issues from non-point source pollution. Everything I talked about earlier, the pet waste, yard waste, fertilizers, nutrients, chloride, salt, all these issues. So we have a 5-year permit that are issued again every 5-year permit terms. And there are what's called 6 minimum control measures we have to address in this permit. Next slide. And just to kind of briefly summarize these 6 minimum control measures that we address in the permit are education outreach. That's where going out, putting up pet waste signs. We're doing trash bash cleanup events. We're going out hosting presentations like tonight on rainscaping and activities like that. We have inlet marking. You'll see the inlet dumping there, where we have groups and kids can go out and glue these no dumping inlet markers down. We have a illicit discharge detection program under MCM3. We call that we're going out. We have staff that walks the creeks and streams in the area looking for illicit discharges, people illegally dumping into our creeks and streams or have illegal connections. Construction site stormwater runoff under minimum control measure number 4. We're looking at the large construction sites, making sure there are sediment fences in place. There are controls in place to address all the sediment from the runoff from construction of these sites. And number 5 is post-construction stormwater management, development, and redevelopment. So this is the big one where when the construction is done on a location, we want that location to install a giant rain garden or some other system in place to address the stormwater that leaves that site. And lastly, pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipal operations. These are working with municipalities on best management practices, such as the education on putting down salt during winter de-icing activities. Next slide. I just want to give you a few examples of what the St. Louis region is doing for green infrastructure and using rainscaping on a large scale. So green infrastructure. So that's stormwater management to be thought of early in the design phase. It means less sewers, less curbs, less hard surfaces, and that equals less runoff. More green space, more swales, more natural features, more innovative thinking outside the box, using Mother Nature. I always like to say Mother Nature is our best designer. Consumers are becoming educated on green practices. We're working with all the developers, all the contractors out there that are used to doing development. And over the past 15 years, I've seen a big change in how people are thinking, putting down less hard surfaces and thinking more green. Next slide. And so just some examples of green infrastructure, filters, bow retention. These are engineered rain gardens, large scale rain gardens that the right image there basically is a depression in the ground with native plants, engineered soil with an under drain system where the ground is acting like a sponge to soak in all the stormwater runoff and pollutants as well. Open channels, infiltration trenches, wet ponds, construction wetlands, and also proprietary BMPs. These are all green infrastructure practices that are being implemented throughout our entire area that is using Mother Nature to reduce stormwater runoff and pollutants. Next slide. Some images we're going to cover next. Curb bump out there showing the upper left. Green roofs are growing to be more popular. Rain gardens, small and large scale. Right-of-way uses along roadways. Kind of a challenge along right-of-ways because you can imagine all the utilities, right, between a sidewalk and the road. So that's something we're still working on, but we are seeing more and more along right-of-ways. Porous pavements, porous asphalt, porous concrete is one of the large choices developers are using for reducing runoff, and bioswales. Next slide. Here's some examples. A good example, one of the earlier rain gardens that were put in St. Louis City. So there you can see a parking lot where the water runs off, goes through a rock sheet buffer, a grass buffer to slow down the energy of the water, and then enters a rain garden system around the entire parking lot with native plants. And in that rain garden, there's some engineered soil. Oh, that's good. Thanks, Allison. And then actually, this is one of the earlier rain gardens at the Missouri Botanical Garden, which is now thriving. And you can see, it's hard to see in the image there, but there are curb bump outs where the water from the parking lot is going directly in this rain garden filled with native plants. Next slide. Here's a good example of porous pavers. I like porous pavers because you can avoid painting too. I like this example. You can see the parking spots. They basically alternate it between porous pavers to kind of define the parking lot spots. So when the water runs off from the concrete area, the impervious area will go in these pavers and soak through the cracks in between the pavers. Education is key, though. We'd like to see signage put around these because one thing you don't want to do is you can plug up the pores between the pavers, or if it's concrete or asphalt, plug up those pores. So we don't want a landscaper coming along dumping down mulch around top of these pavers the porous pavement, because that can really cause a blockage or decrease the performance of how these pavers and systems work. Next slide. Good example of a Walmart. I think this is down in Kirkwood. They have a large rain gardens, bioretention system right in their front parking lot. So one thing you'll notice, you're going to notice a sewer structure in the middle. One thing we have to address is still the large storm events, right? The large flooding storm events like we had last July. We don't want these systems to become overwhelmed. So there's always an overflow structure in every one of these that can take on the excess flow just in case there is a problem. Next slide. MSD, what are we doing large scale? We're putting in block size rain gardens to take on several blocks of runoff. This is in North City, a large rain garden. You can see, so this takes on about a block of runoff from the nearby streets. You can kind of see to the upper right there. When the water comes in up through the curb cut, off the street, there's some large rocks there that kind of slow down the water, the energy of the water before it goes into the rain garden system there. And I do want to point out to the right, you're going to see that overflow structure to protect the area from flooding from the large rainfall events. Next slide. So before I turn it back over to Allison, one thing I'd like to encourage you to go check out is our MSD map viewer of all the rain gardens and porous pavement systems in the entire service area. So that's our service area up to the north. You're going to see that's the Missouri River, bordered by the Mississippi River to the right, to the east there, and to the south, the Merrimack River. If you go to our msdprojectclear.org website, look for the BMP toolbox, and you'll see this map viewer. You'll be able to zoom in and see all these systems I just showed you. And then you'll be able to see a footprint and learn more information about these. Just click on any of the water draws. There's literally thousands of these installed since we started implementing these requirements back in 2008. Next slide. And I'm going to turn that over to Allison.
All right, thanks so much, Roland. So I'll be talking about rainscaping more on a residential scale, but it's basically the same principles that Roland has already highlighted. So we're going to be really reinforcing ourselves and hopefully driving the point home. So rainscaping is, the technical definition is any combination of plantings, water features, catch basins, permeable pavement, and other activities that manage stormwater as close as possible to where it falls rather than moving it someplace else. And so the goal is to slow the water down and allow it to soak into the ground. And we do this by reducing impervious surface area and replacing it with pervious surface areas, or replacing turf grass with deep-rooted native plants. So if you can imagine that lawn grass is about 3, maybe 4 inches tall, and that is a good analogy for how deep it goes into the ground as well. So very shallow root systems, whereas our native plants will have very deep roots that are really good at holding water in the soil. And this infographic comes from the Missouri Botanical Gardens Rainscaping Guide, and I put the link down there in the bottom corner, this mobot.org/rainscaping. I'm going to go through some of these rainscaping features, but there's way more information on that website as well. So the classic rainscaping example is rain gardens, and we're going to talk a lot about those, so I won't spend too much time on those right now. A bioswale is a planted pathway that takes water from point A to point B, slowing the water down as it goes and hopefully soaking some of that water in along the way. Rock weirs and filter socks are tools that you can use in really steep, really high flow areas to prevent erosion issues. And rainwater harvesting, rain barrels and cisterns are kind of fun because they're often an entry point for a lot of residential projects to get into the rainscaping world. Permeable pavers, I'm going to talk about more in a moment. And there aren't a ton of residential scale green roof projects, but they do exist. And this is a rainscaping tool as well. Lawn alternatives are one of the most common rainscaping features that we see. And I like them because they are useful for most people. And soil amendments, so things like compost and mulch can improve your soil quality over time and make your soil more absorbent for rainscaping purposes. There are ways to manage your yard, even if you keep your lawn, that are better for water quality and better for the environment. And there's a really nice page on the Rainscaping Guide about that. And then these last two items, the woodland restoration and creek corridor vegetative buffer, are mostly applicable for people that live sort of on the edge of a natural area that's usually been compromised by invasive species. And so going in there and taking out the invasive species and replacing those with the appropriate native plants. And you just want to be really careful anytime you're working in a creek corridor, because the opportunity for erosion is really high. So you want to be extra careful there. Okay, so going a little deeper on rain gardens. Rain gardens are essentially a garden that has a planted basin, a pretty shallow basin, only 4 to 8 inches deep. It has to contain a basin, a berm, some plan for the water that overflows that berm, and then a way for the water to reach the rain garden in the first place. And because you have all these different areas within the rain garden, that gives you a lot of different microhabitats that will better favor different types of plants. So in the basin, you're going to want to have plants that are really happy having wet feet, because that's where the water is going to sit while it soaks in the ground. And then up on the berm on the sides, you're going to want things that can tolerate wet feet in a rain event, but then are also okay having more drier conditions, because they'll be the first to dry out. So Roland's going to talk about specifically building a rain garden in your on your own, but I'm just going to talk about some of the technical considerations to keep in mind. And these are the things that we look at in the grant application that people sometimes don't think about. So this decision tree is on the Rainscaping Guide as well, and I'm basically just going to talk through those questions briefly. So the first one is the site a woodland? So if you already have a bunch of trees in your yard, we really don't want you to take the trees out and install a rain garden instead, because trees are great at absorbing stormwater. And if you are excavating below a tree for that rain garden basin, you're likely going to damage tree roots and potentially harm the tree. So that's counterproductive to stormwater management. The second question is, can you pass a percolation test? And I'm going to hop forward to talk about percolation tests. If you want to see these directions online, it's mobot.org/perk. Basically, you dig a 6-inch hole, fill it with water, and let that soak in, because you want the ground to be saturated before you start. So like tomorrow would be a great day to do a percolation test, because it's rained a lot today. So once you fill that soil or fill that hole again after it's been saturated, come check it after 24 hours. And if the hole has drained completely, then it's suitable for a rain garden. So if you don't pass the pass the percolation test, you cannot just amend the soil, because still those base soils below that area and to the sides of that are not going to be absorbent enough. You don't want to add in rain garden mix. You really want to work with the existing conditions that you have. Don't want to build at the bottom of a hill or at the top of the hill. You want it to kind of be in that middle area, and you generally want to position it perpendicular to the flow of the water entering it so that you can absorb the most water possible. And then it's really important that the rain garden be at least 10 to 15 feet from any building with a basement. So that includes your neighbor's house too. And then finally, just some other technical considerations. You just want to be thinking about what watershed the rain garden is capturing. So we use a ratio of 1 to 5 or 20%. If you know where the rain is coming from, if your neighbor just built a really fancy new impervious driveway, you might know that area and be able to measure it with their permission and do that calculation on your own. But if you say live at the bottom of your neighborhood and you really have no idea how large that area is, or if the area is way too big for you to be able to build a rain garden large enough, that's when you want to be most likely working with a professional to make sure that your rain garden will not make water issues worse by encouraging water to go there and not being big enough to handle the amount of water that it receives. And then again, just how can the water reach the rain garden? Can you disconnect a downspout and have it piped into the rain garden? And what's going to happen to that rain garden when the basin overflows? And then finally, again, a principle of naturescaping or native landscaping is to work with the conditions that you have. Don't re-engineer your yard. Usually, almost always, it's not necessary to change the grading. And that kind of work is really expensive. So it's better to avoid that if you can. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through some example photos. Here's a rain garden. It's all through the Deer Creek program that I think is something like 9 years old now. So it's still holding up, still working well. And I like this one because it shows the downspout on that wall there that leads to the rain garden. Here's a larger one too, showing that pop-up drain for overflow. And this is the rain garden at the Shaw Nature Reserve and the Whitmire Wildflower Garden. This is one that was recently installed through the MSD Small Grants program. And it's nice to see a rain garden in the front yard. It can work really, really well. And this is just a neat one. I like all the small cells and that it incorporates the walkway. A rain garden is not a pond or a mosquito habitat. A rain garden should drain within 24 to 48 hours, so it doesn't hold water long enough for those larvae to mature. And then there's a pretty common misconception that native gardening is no maintenance gardening, but hopefully you know that that's not the case. They just require a different type of maintenance. And once those plants are established, they should be lower maintenance than other exotic gardens. Okay, I'm gonna quickly talk about some of these other rainscaping features. I mentioned lawn alternatives earlier. So that's just finding an alternative to your lawn, removing or reducing turf grass and replacing with deep-rooted native plants. I like this example because it highlights that you can still keep a lot of your lawn. So if you have dogs or you have kids, you can still have space for people to run around and dedicate some of that area to stormwater management. And then against that fence there, you'll see there's a rain garden, a lawn alternative. And then also that's working in conjunction with the permeable paver system there. Just my segue to talk about permeable pavers. So you're looking at about 8 to 12 inches of base layers underneath that paver system on top. And generally you just want to think about, if you're interested in a permeable paver patio, the same requirements as a rain garden. So you have to pass a percolation test, and it has to be 10 to 15 feet from a building. If you can't pass a percolation test, doesn't mean that you can't have a permeable paver system, but you're probably going to need to make some accommodations for what happens to the water when the patio fills up. And this is a sample permeable paver cross section. So it includes that 3-inch perch drain. So this would be an instance where you can't pass a percolation test. And then there's that heavy duty plastic too. So there are ways that you can work with the conditions and fit that to your site. We just really want to be careful that you're not exacerbating stormwater issues on your property. Here's a nice before and after with permeable pavers and a rain garden. Okay, talking about rainwater harvesting. So anywhere from rain barrels that are 50 gallons to thousands of gallon size cistern systems. I see those all through the grant program. So the thing to know about rain barrels is that they're going to fill up really fast. The metric that I remember is that a 1-inch rainfall will fill up or moderate rainfall will fill up a 55-gallon rain barrel in about 1 hour. So they don't have the hugest impact on stormwater management necessarily, but if you're a gardener, it's definitely a great source of free water, and it can be a really nice part of some rainscaping solutions. Things to keep in mind are that making sure those seals are tight enough to keep mosquitoes from laying any eggs in there. And then also having a way to shut off the water access during the winter so that the water doesn't expand and burst the pipes. And finally, that they are gravity fed. So unless you have a really fancy mechanized system, you're going to need it to be up off the ground so that the water can actually get out of the barrel. So here's one of those bigger systems that was installed last year, a whole lot of water they're able to harvest there. And then this is a smaller scale example, and it's nice that it's up the hill there, and then the homeowner is able to use that water to water their lawn alternative. I've already talked a bit about trees, but really want to drive home the message that trees are really great at managing stormwater. And not only are their roots great at holding that water in the soil, but trees stop the rainwater from hitting the ground in the first place, like Roland showed in that early slide. So we really want to work with the existing trees and consider planting more trees if you have the space. Okay, I'm going to shift gears really quick and talk about why native plants are so great. So I've talked about how their roots are so excellent at holding stormwater in the soil, and they do eventually require less maintenance than exotic ornamentals, less time once they're established, and you never need to use any chemical fertilizers or anything like that you might on exotics. Native plants are adapted to our environment. They've been growing here for millennia. So one thing I love about native plants and rainscaping is that the same deep roots that make them able to hold water and take up a ton of water in a rain event also make them really drought tolerant. So they're just superstars at any kind of moisture condition. And of course, native plants provide wildlife habitat. We're living through an extinction crisis, so it's something really great that we can do as individuals to combat that by planting native plants and supporting wildlife that way. And then a part of that is the education opportunity that it provides. So if you're planting caterpillar host plants, then you might have the opportunity to watch that caterpillar become a chrysalis, and that's exciting for anybody. And to connect that to sense of place. Like I was thinking about going to Las Vegas and seeing tropical plants everywhere. It's a very strange feeling. You're like, this doesn't feel quite right. So you can kind of get a sense of where you are by the native plants. And it's really a unique way to do that. So just putting some science behind the native plant argument. Hopefully you guys are familiar with Doug Tallamy. He's kind of the academic native plant advocate that we rely on a lot. But the interesting fact is that 96% of birds rear their young on insects. And so how many caterpillars does it take to feed just one nest of chickadees? If we were together, I would ask you that, but I'll just tell you that it's about 300 a day or 5,000 per nest, which is a whole lot of caterpillars just for one clutch of eggs. And of course, where do you find 500 caterpillars? You find them on native plants. So this is mostly an excuse to show you these really cool pictures of caterpillars on native plants, but these are good ones to know to plant for habitat support. And so according to Tallamy and Narango and Mara, you want to aim for 70% of the biomass in your yard to be native in order to support wildlife. So that's the number that we use in the grant programs to make sure that the projects have enough native plants. I've talked a lot about root depth, but this is such a great demonstration. If you can see the lawn grass there on the left is hardly any roots compared to the lovely native plants. And these slides are to show that you can employ design techniques that are in more traditional landscaping very well with native plants. So working with complementary and analogous colors to make your landscape really sing. Just some nice examples. And then again, working with mass plantings to highlight formality in a garden. So I look at this photo and I don't think, oh, there's a habitat garden. I look at it and think, well, that's a really formal shade garden. So there are ways to work with textures and mass plantings to create a really formal looking design that will hopefully, please your neighbors and your HOAs and things like that. Okay, I will pass it back to Roland.
Great, thanks, Allison. Well, hopefully we have a lot of you fired up now, ready to put a rain garden in, or and some other rainscaping ideas are turning in your head right now. So before we wrap up, I'd like to go ahead and just walk through a basic, design of a small rain garden on a residential home. So, we're not going to go into details of the soil conditions. We're going to presume here that you passed your soil test and you're ready to start planning and grabbing the shovel. So, we're going to cover some identified potential locations. Allison indicated the distance, place at least 10 feet from a house to avoid foundation seepage. Don't place over a septic system. Don't build where ground slope is greater than 12%. Consider adding a border for aesthetic appeal. Not in the right of way along the street edge because of utility issues. Avoid buried utilities. Not in soggy wet areas. Catch at the source upstream and visible from a window so you can enjoy it. Next slide. So take a look at your property. It's always good just to draw it out. Get a footprint on your property. Consider, well, how much water am I going to capture? And most likely you're just going to capture off if you have gabled roof system, just off one corner of your roof, maybe a 300, 400, 500 square foot area. So you might want to put two in. You might want to put one in your backyard, capture the back corner of one of the back corners of your home, and maybe in the front yard, somewhere out the corner, close to the driveway, away from your driveway. Next slide. So here's just the rain garden of a small home where actually this property owner, actually the drain pipe went from the roof out the garage all the way to the street. So the opportunity here was to capture some runoff from the driveway, but also capture that roof runoff down from the downspout. So you could see there before, kind of drawing out on the property where the rain garden is going to go. I'm a kidney shaped, nice design, looks always good for a rain garden, and capturing that runoff from the downspout. Next slide. So 5 steps. You can design your rain garden, calculate the size of your rain garden in 5 steps. I'm going to show you how to do this. The following steps is based on basically a good rule of thumb is 30% of the drainage area. And typical 6 inches deep, you saw Allison covered earlier, 4 to 8 inches is the typical size of rain garden, capturing off one downspout drain to the rain garden. So let's say you got a 2,000 square foot home with 4 downspouts. So you're going to capture one of those corners of that roof, right? So 2,000 divided by 4, you got 500 square feet covering that one corner of the house. So the size of your rain garden is 500 times that 30% factor, 150 square feet. So what size of it, length and width, right? What do you want it to be? Well, let's say if the owner wants the rain garden to be 15 feet long, you just take that 150 divided by the 15 feet, it's 10 feet wide, 10 foot wide. Well, it's time to get the shovel. Next slide. So before you start digging, you got that shovel in your hand now. You do want to call dig right? Make sure you don't, dig up any utilities, whether the cable line or the phone or the modem. So our virtual meetings don't go out, right? That can be a big problem. And try to take on that drain pipe. As I mentioned in that diagram earlier, that water from the downspout that went to the street, you want to try to capture that. So you can, so the water going there. But also you might consider a pop-up or a 90-degree elbow, elevate it. So you can use that as your overflow in case there is too much water collecting in that area. You don't want standing around due to a heavy rainfall event. And it could carry on the overflow to the street. Next slide. So what are you going to do with all that dirt, right? So we'll consider using it on one of the sides of the rain garden. So there's the before picture on the top showing the slope of the ground. Once you dig out your garden, you can take that dirt you dug out and use that as a berm downstream. Next slide. So just kind of after here, it was put in, and you'll see you got some palm sedge in there, some prairie blazing star, and kind of in the background. It's kind of nice coverage there. You got, palm sedge is kind of nice throughout the year. It looks good. And just a small picture from inside the garden. Again, mention borders and other things you can do, such as maybe some stones in the inside of it, just to give it a little appeal. Next slide. So let's cover some basic maintenance tips. Ponding water. After a rain shower, it is normal to see shallow ponding in the rain garden for a day or two. Don't worry about it. We'll see through. Again, in our area, the clay soils in our area, typically they will drain. So as Allison mentioned earlier, you don't want to go in and modify the soil. You want to use what you have, and the soil will drain. Weeding. Weed growth during the plant establishment period is typical. And weed removal helps eliminate competition with desirable plants. Weeds can be addressed with spot herbicide or by pulling, preferably pulling. Watering. Plants in your rain garden should not require watering once mature plants are established. However, a little watering will help out first, especially during drought periods. Trimming and pruning. Stems from grasses and flowers can be left through the fall and winter to add visual interest and to provide food and cover for birds. Trim plants in near surface in February, March, remove dead vegetation to encourage new growth in the spring. Edges. Talked about borders earlier. A border defines the edge of a garden just as a frame defines a painting. A strip of mowed turf, stones, or walking path can really set the area apart and can improve the appearance of the garden. Again, for more information, you can check out MSC website, the BMP toolbox I talked about earlier with that map viewer. We have more these tips and more on that website. Next slide, Allison. So we do have on a BMP toolbox some helpful owners and maintenance brochure series for rain gardens, porous pavement, and other BMPs as well. So on there, you're going to see things such as common weeds in your garden, get to know some of the native plants in your garden. We have a QR code you can link to get more information. And one thing I do want to point out, up in the upper right-hand corner there, that's our MSD main building. We just put in a lot of green infrastructure, really to show off some of the work we're touting, right? So this is our front area rain garden we just finished last year. You get an opportunity, check it out, 2350 Market Street, downtown Market and Jefferson. Next slide. Here's the back of that rain garden maintenance brochure I'm talking about. In it, you're going to see a nice seasonal checklist, things you can do seasonally to take care of your rain garden. Some things I covered in that earlier bullet point. But there's a lot of information on here. Again, purpose of the rain garden, how it can help, but that seasonal checklist can really be helpful for you. Next slide. So last, before I end here, I just want to cover some other yard best management practices you can do around your home. Never allow yard waste to be washed down or put in the storm drains. That's a big problem, especially fall time with those leaves. That can cause a lot of blockages in our creeks and streams and the storm inlets. Don't sweep or blow grass clippings along the street or into the storm drain. Don't dump grass or yard waste in the creek bank or area where it can be washed into creeks and rivers. We see a lot of people do this. They think it helps. All that material does in the bank is when it does rain, our creeks are so flash in the area because of all the runoff. It's just going to wash that material away. And then what's going to be underneath it is nothing, because the material that was there killed the grass and it's just bare soil. It's just going to cause erosion problems and carry the fertilizer nutrients that was in that yard waste. That's just going to end up in the creeks or streams, causing nutrient problem and algae blooms and deplete oxygen in our waterways. Control soil erosion in your property by planting native trees and ground cover to stabilize erosion-prone areas. Composting is great for leaves, brush, grass clippings, and other yard waste. Mow the grass hard and leave grass clippings on the lawn to retain moisture and provide nutrients to the soil as they decompose. Again, using Mother Nature to help everyone to help out with your yard. Don't overwater your lawn and garden. This may increase leaching of fertilizers to ground and surface water. Eliminate all chemicals and pesticide fertilizers except herbicides to manage invasive plants. Next slide. So with that, just want to cover some resources and some tools that Allison's going to cover here. A little more information about the grants. Allison?
All right, thanks, Roland. So a lot of my job is administering these grant programs. So I definitely want to plug them, even though I know that maybe not everybody is eligible for them. Maybe someone that is. The MSD Rainscaping Small Grants Program is operating on a rolling basis. So whenever your application is ready, you can submit it. It's a $3,000 to $4,000 reimbursement grant, eligible for anybody in the MSD service area. And then the second program is the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Rainscaping Cost Share Program. This one operates on an annual basis, and round 2023 is currently open. The materials are all online. Applications are due June 2nd. Installations will take place this fall or spring of 2024. And this is a cost share program, so costs are 75% reimbursable to a maximum of $4,500. These are both reimbursement grants, so you have to pay out of pocket and then you get reimbursed after quality assurance, and only one grant per person or property. Your eligibility is determined by your address. So this tiny URL link will lead you to this interactive map. It's also linked on our program web pages, but you can see that the big blue area here, including the blue inside the pink outline, is all eligible for a $3,000 reimbursement through the MSD Small Grants Program, and the green areas are eligible for $4,000 through the MSD Small Grants Program. And then the shaded in pink areas are the Deer Creek $4,500 reimbursements. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I think a lot of people haven't applied for a grant before and don't really know what to expect. So I like to temper expectations. It's a drawn out process. It's a lot of waiting. So just have that expectation in mind when you go into the project. And you want to apply generally about a season before you're planning to install. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out. We'll make sure that you get my contact information.
Great, thanks, Allison. So, everybody's got an iPhone, right? Everybody's got an iPhone. Everybody's got apps. So one cool thing I want to show as a resource is check out this app from Real Simple Software. You can search it on your apps page. It's a free rainwater harvesting app. So if you wanted to, for example, do a rain barrel, calculate, okay, size, if you know the drainage area you're gonna pull the water from, you can enter in those numbers, and then you can put in different capture percentages, and then you can actually get a calculation showing how much the size of your system you need, and you can actually then email that directly to your home email address. It's a pretty cool tool, so I definitely encourage everyone to check this out. There are lots of tools out there, but this is one that's been around, one of the earlier ones, and it's still one of the best ones out there, I think. So definitely encourage you to use this as one of your tools in your toolbox if you are going to move forward on doing some rainscaping on your property. Next slide. And lastly, to wrap it up, we just want to cover some general resources or websites here where you can learn more about rainscaping. The Missouri Botanical Garden, Grow Native is a great resource for rain gardens. And Grow Native too, there's also a lot of templates you can pull from. Wild Ones is a great resource. Audubon Society with the Brink Conservation Home Program. And like Allison mentioned earlier, Doug Talamy's books. Lots of wonderful books out there from Doug on native landscaping is available too. And with that, that's all we have. We can some phone numbers and emails that are available, including Deer Creek Watershed Alliance and the MSD Small Grants Program. And with that, I guess we can address some questions.
Yes, sorry. We have several questions that have come in already, and the chat is open. So if anyone thinks of anything, you can add that. But one of the pressing questions is, do you know of resources available to St. Charles residents for these kinds of programs, grant funding programs?
So off the top of my head, I don't. Usually the advice I give is to check with your local municipality, because they will know about opportunities there. And sometimes it's not a rainscaping grant per se, but they might have like a tree program or a naturescaping program. So usually there's some sort of option in place. I don't know if you know about anything, Roland.
Nope, that's ditto that response there. Also, I'll add maybe check with the Missouri Department of Conservation. That's another good resource. But yeah, just check with the local municipality or with St. Louis, with St. Charles County themselves, and to see what they have available.
Great advice. To think also, yeah, we have the luxury of having this really nice tailored program for Rainscaping specifically, but it's a great point that other types of native landscaping or naturescaping kinds of programming or funding rather might fit the bill for these kinds of things too. So thank you for that insight. Another question we had, which was one I hadn't seen before, I don't remember it coming up in last year's program along these lines, was about pool water. A lot of us have neighbors that have pools, and someone commented that they have their neighbors draining their pools out to the street. Is there conventional wisdom about where best to do that? What kind of system to best drain to? Or is there any funding that supports diverting the pool water to the proper sorts of waste?
Yeah, I can address that. So we actually, MSD, if you go to our website, we do have information for a household pool drain water. The backwash water, should go to a sanitary sewer, but the other water can go to the storm sewer system. Now, but however, if you do that, some of the things we want to make sure you do is, don't add chlorine to it for a couple of days. You want that chlorine level to get to a low concentration, typically below what we call 1 part per million, 1 milligram per liter. So you want to make sure you don't add any chlorine to it, because that can be a big problem. And and so that's really the biggest thing we do tell people there on residential pool water.
Great. I just put that post in the chat. Looks like from the about how to safely drain your pool or spa. So hopefully that information can be shared, maybe in a very diplomatic way, I'm sure, with neighbors. But there was also a question about rain. You mentioned rain barrels and the great source for at watering our yards. But someone asked about caps versus screens for the top of the rain barrels. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, not really. So,
Yeah, you said caps versus screens.
Yes, yeah. So I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think either, not really. I think they're both, both acceptable. The screens might capture a little more if it's a larger screen over the area. So MSD, we sold some rain barrels years ago. They had like a large screen over the top, the entire surface of it. So the downspout came down the middle, would go through the screen, but also had a little area around there too. So, that can collect, maybe some additional rainwater or something from there. But yeah, no real preference. You go all the big box stores now, see all types of rain barrels, fittings from the downspout to the top of it. Go to Pinterest. I think that's one of the biggest resources I found to be helpful for seeing just a wide variety of types of rain barrels, designs, appearance, how they different functions are different and different components for rain barrels.
Gotcha. Yeah, they definitely, what a different world we live in from say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and the proliferation of rain barrels and all the different ways that they can make them function. So there was a good question about because of kind of the more extreme weather events we're having, we're coming up against maybe some very emergent and urgent issues perhaps with our foundations and that sort of thing. So someone asked about they've had to put in a swale due to stormwater coming into their property by the foundation. They can't wait a season because they're concerned about foundation damage. Are the grant opportunities, is that just something you have to be able to plan ahead for? If you're in an emergency kind of situation, are there grant monies available?
Yeah, you have to apply and get approval before you install. So if you've already done the work, you're not eligible for reimbursement. And the rainscaping features that we're talking about are designed to handle the average moderate rainfall. So if it rains 8 inches, it's going to overwhelm that system. So unfortunately, you know, there's not always a lot of resources for the homeowner in that kind of situation. But that might be another instance where you might want to work with your municipality for flooding resources.
And so we had also some questions, a question about if you rent your property, are these grant opportunities available to you as a renter, or does it have to come from the owner or the property owner?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's for the landowner. A landowner can do a project on a rental property, but it's only one grant per landowner. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not a good grant program for renters, but you can usually still do some native landscaping, you know, on your own in a rental.
All right, good information to have for sure. And so native landscaping, rainscaping, all of that, we were having a lot of questions, more so than I've typically seen about having someone to come and help plan a rainscaping garden. So you mentioned a few resources, but are there anybody in particular that folks could turn to, or types of landscapers that might?
Yeah, great question. On both of these websites, there are lists of contractors that have participated in the programs before. So they're not recommendations, but these are people that are familiar with the programs and have had projects funded through them. So it's a really great place to start. And depending on, you know, where you are versus their service area, they might be able to recommend you a landscaper that is more local to you. Especially if you go to the Deer Creek website, there's a contractor guide. So if you want to work with a landscaper or contractor that you know or that's already working with you, you can share that resource with them, and that will give them information about, you know, the types of features that we approve and the kind of best management practices that we're looking for. So that can be a good starting place for people.
Wonderful, thank you. So then we also had a couple of questions about if your yard happens to be, let's say, either maybe the low point in the neighborhood, or I definitely lived my house in South City was that, or if you happen to be the place where the storm drain is on your block, and your yard is soaking or soggy at best for the spring months. Is this a good candidate for a rain garden perhaps, or to help mitigate that sogginess? Or do they need to just go through the steps of like evaluating the property to find out if that's really a good fit?
So, I mean, it kind of goes back to that, don't build a rain garden in a low area. If you're at the bottom of your neighborhood, really you want your uphill neighbors to be installing rain gardens. One of the questions on that decision tree says let loose in low areas. So if you have a clay area that doesn't drain well, but water stands there, you can just put rain garden basin plants like rushes and sedges and things like that like to have wet feet, and basically have a rain garden basin without doing all the excavation and berms and overflows and things like that. And it's essentially a lawn alternative, but if you put those really water loving plants there, they will take up a lot of water and not necessarily solve the issue, but hopefully alleviate it. And then you can put a sign in your yard that your neighbors will see and maybe get some ideas.
You also create some pretty cool habitat too.
Yeah. So kind of along those lines, someone asked about minimizing mosquitoes. Of course, in St. Louis, that's always a concern when we have places where water collects or maybe it's soggy a bit. But I know last week in our oh goodness, what was the container gardening program, I think there was a mention of some native plants that are carnivorous that you can plant in water. So things like that might be useful for mitigating mosquitoes without chemicals. Just a thought. But I don't want to dwell on mosquitoes for this. But we had another question about, you mentioned lawn alternative. Someone wanted a little bit of clarification on letting your lawn, I'll find the question again, but letting your lawn be a little bit longer, or not mowing as close. They wanted to know like maybe some guidelines for like how short or how tall maybe to mow to help with this sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, 2 to 3 inches is a good height. 3 inches.
Yeah, if you're mowing, going out there all the time, running a lawnmower over it, you're compacting the soil further. So mowing less often is good for the soil. And I think farther north, they have no mow May, but we're a little further south. So you might say no mow April, because those earliest violets and things in your lawn weeds are some of the earliest pollen sources for bees and things like that.
Mhm.
I think my dad made it till mid-May last year.
All right.
He finally saved. Yeah, so yeah, I love that initiative, by the way. And there's so many great things to help us help our local ecosystems like that. So I'm just looking back, and we do have so many questions about where to go for help. So thank you again for pointing out the contractor list. And it's good to know that those people have had hopefully have had experience with these projects, and that goes a long way in just navigating those things. And so here's this great question about different kinds of soil. So they say so the person that says I don't understand how the fill of the rain garden is different from native soils. Is there, I remember you said at the beginning not to worry about, or we weren't getting into kind of the makeup of the soil, but are there things that people should know about the kind of soil they should have in their rain garden or fill that they have there?
So you don't want to fill the rain garden with anything. You want to use the soil that you already have. Top dressing, like just putting a top layer of like 1 to 2 inches of compost or mulch, depending on like how high flow the area is. There's different products that are recommended. So yeah, you don't want to put any soil into the rain garden. If you're working with a bioengineered system where you're like digging everything out and creating it from scratch, then you would use a rain garden mix. But otherwise you just want to work with your native soil.
Yeah, and even like the engineered systems, large systems, they might contain just some more sand, something to keep that soil loose and, increase the capacity to hold on to that stormwater and capture it. A lot of times too, the construction site, what happens is too, before the digging into the bioretention area, there might be a lot of compaction from heavy equipment taking place in the property. So, obviously they do need to kind of rethink that then before putting the soil, when they do dig that out, that existing soil is compacted. So they need to pull that out, and also to consider putting in the under drain systems, which I showed earlier for large systems. That all needs to be considered. And yeah, so an engineered soil will be added in those larger systems.
Okay, great. And so another question about there are the steps that people can take to kind of figure out what makes sense for their yard, as highlighted earlier in the presentation. But if someone wants someone to come out to evaluate their yard, or what kind of stormwater management makes sense for them, is there a resource for that?
Well, the fastest way to get someone out there would be to hire a contractor to come out and do a consultation, and they usually charge a fee for that. Another service is the Audubon Society's Spring Conservation Home program. you can get on a wait list for that, and highly trained volunteers will come to your site and actually make recommendations for plants and specific features. And then they'll give you like a habitat rating. So that's a really awesome service, but I think their wait list is pretty far out there. So that takes a while.
Yep. And I know for the bird conservation home program too, they get pretty technical. I sat in their training last week actually. And they're really getting involved in quite a bit, even looking at the soil conditions, and they're really doing a good job, looking at all aspects of a project, and really can give someone some really good advice. But yeah, think you want to get on the list.
Yeah, I know they keep.
But there are a lot of resources out there. I think there's even a list right on the small grants program page, I think, of contractors, Allison. I'm not sure, but
yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, I know Bird Conservation Home, I believe they're adding volunteers, but demand probably is just continuing to grow, especially this time of year with these programs. A couple of their volunteers will be with us next week to talk about shade gardens. So looking forward to that, because actually one of those presenters I've known for like 20 years. We're friends from a different life.
Wow.
And
Great.
both ended up here. So lots of great resources coming up there. Perfect. So we have all that. I think we do have a request. If you would, could you put your your contact info up again? If maybe from the beginning.
Yeah.
If that's all right. And I think we're kind of working through kind of the general questions. And yeah, so I think we're kind of working through the general questions we've had here. I know that someone asked about using this information to improve river to pair. I know that's a particular subject for South St. Louis in particular. And I know, for example, like Forest Relief just helped with a tiny forest project this weekend, planting trees alongside the Greenway. I think they planted 500 trees on Saturday with various organizations and groups. So I know that's something that we're constantly working on to improve kind of the environment around the river. But is this the sort of thing that will help to continue to make that a better resource, I guess, or a better feature of our community?
Absolutely. I mean, all along that, yeah, I know GRG, Great Rivers Greenway, is doing a great job along the greenways, along the entire river to pair, and throughout the entire area, in fact, of doing a lot of rainscaping, rain gardenings along there. In addition to addressing stormwater issues, but think about the habitat they're creating, and then by putting these, all together, they're connecting the dots with biodiversity, and really just, it's a wonderful job what they're doing, improving the area. Addressing water quality issues, storm runoff issues, and again, improving our area with habitat and biodiversity.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all doing all these things together. Again, you all listening tonight at the residential level, what organizations are doing like Great Rivers Greenway, Audubon Society, what commercial development properties are doing. I mentioned earlier in the Stormwater Phase 2 program. Us all working together, we're all going to make a difference together.
Yeah. I think that's the exciting thing for me, and I think for the library to be a part of this, is that it is such a team effort. One of my cheesy go-to phrases is teamwork makes the dream work, and I think that's definitely.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. What county's doing. County is, has amended ordinances and rules and regulations for planning and design, addressing reduced parking areas and things like that too. Also, are just definitely innovative ways to, this adds to the improvement, adds to the suite of menu of all these practices we're doing to make improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you all being with us tonight and sharing the scope of what your expertise is and how that fits into the larger picture of native landscaping in St. Louis and in the region. We really appreciate that. And yeah, exciting times, great resources available. I will say there was a question about the rain barrels through MSD. I know that's where I got mine a long time ago. Do you guys still have that program for residents to obtain rain barrels through y'all?
We, no longer, because they're all kind of available in big box stores now. So we went through 2 big sales years ago, and they're, yeah, spectacular. I mean, we sold out each time, but now they're, available, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, online. There's a lot of places to get them. So.
All right, well, great, good to know. Again, things have changed so remarkably in a fairly short time. So thank you for sharing all these wonderful resources and places for people to hopefully apply these techniques and these approaches to their own yards. I know I love that the library, a lot of our newer properties, our newer renovations include rain gardens, and it's a feature that I love to see. And hopefully more of our residential properties around here and other places will have them too. So thank you so much. We're getting lots of lovely comments in the chat, thanking you for your presentation this evening. Couldn't agree more. So thank you everyone for your great questions. Thank you, Roland and Allison, for joining us this evening. And this video recording will be on YouTube within a few days, probably tomorrow. And if you registered for tonight's program, and then you'll get the link emailed to you. You won't have to go hunting for it. So yeah, I hope you got some inspiration this evening, and hopefully you'll join us for more programs upcoming. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.